Good morning, everyone. We're continuing with our series, How to Work with People, based on Swami's wonderful little book, The Art of Supportive Leadership. So let's begin with the prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master, Paramhansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, dear friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Help us to understand how we may be of true and lasting value to the people around us, to the projects we aspire to create, to the world as a whole. Open our hearts and minds to your guiding presence, that everything we do will be in harmony with the influx of light into this world. We are your children. Guide us and bless us. Om. Peace. Amen. Well, now we're changing to chapter 5 of this book. I don't know how many chapters there are, actually. Maybe 10, 14, 11, that's how many. Leadership means service, and goodness knows we've mentioned that more than once, but now this chapter is going to be specifically on that point. Too much attention generally is given to the position rather than to the function of leadership. This is the title that we've taken this, function rather than position. But once rank assumes importance for its own sake, creativity and meaningful progress grind to a halt. Only a weak leader feels the need to waive his position before his subordinates. It's a very interesting way to put it. Only a weak leader feels the need to waive his position in front of his subordinates. If the only reason you're able to get cooperation from the people with whom you work, or who work under you, if you want to use that expression, is because you tell them they have to obey you because you're in charge, in terms of anything like supportive leadership or real success as a leader, you're already completely lost. And just as a kind of a guideline that you might want to keep in your pocket if you're in a leadership position, whenever you hear yourself talking like that, or acting like, how dare they have their own opinions, after all, I'm in charge, then really stop and examine, because you have a much deeper problem going on. You have a deeper problem in your group. Now that is different than saying, but I'm responsible. You know, this is what I'll talk about in a moment let me read another line or two, and then I'll go into this. A strong leader, on the other hand, wins support for his position by using his authority to focus attention on the work to be done, rather than focusing attention on his own position of leadership in the work. Because self-importance is the natural human inclination, a safe attitude for you, if you are a leader, will be to remind yourself constantly that the position of a leader is not, in the deepest sense, any more important than that of the humblest follower. Both are simply contributing whatever skills they possess to the advancement of an undertaking. Often, indeed, the subordinate, because of his freedom to specialize, is in a position to make a more visible contribution than the leader, whose job essentially is to work through others. There's an aphorism, a Chinese aphorism, that says when a project is completed, the indication of the best leader is that the people will say we did it ourselves, because the leader will have empowered them to be able to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. The fact is, though, And Swami hasn't actually touched this point anywhere. Well, he did a little bit. Every group, the spirit of a group is a reflection of the consciousness of the leader. So that is not to say that the leader isn't essential and that a good leader is the difference between success and failure, because everyone has certain talents that they can bring to bear. And you might have a specialist in design or in engineering or in art or even in communication, somebody who's extremely good at the one thing that they do, but they might completely lack the ability to see how all the pieces fit together. They may become egoically infatuated with their contribution so that they can't tell what is actually needed from them. When I was first learning how to do promotional work, advertising, there was this man named Michael Toms, and at that time, which was the 70s, he ran in San Francisco a foundation called New Dimensions, and he ran a weekly radio program. The New Dimensions radio program was like it was a beacon of clarity and light for the whole movement that was happening at that time. Not the spiritual, the new thought, the whole new age energy. It all ran through New Dimensions Radio. It was actually very interesting. Michael, in the course of his, 20 years or more of running that weekly radio show, which was an interview program, and he was superb as an interviewer. He just knew exactly what he was supposed to do. Every significant revolutionary thinker of those whole decades was interviewed by Michael on New Dimensions Radio. Actually, at some point, as time passed, the value of the archive he had created became recognized, and I think Stanford University purchased it. And it's an important piece of cultural history. Anyway, he was helping us in the publishing and the promotion of Swami's autobiography, The Path. I guess we got to know him because he interviewed Swami several times over the course of years, and we just got to be friends. He was a wonderful, helpful man. And so he was my mentor. He taught me about how to do promotional work. And I was never a master of it like him, but I had a few rules. Now, the whole point of this is very small, and it's not even related to Michael. I was just sort of explaining how I ever got into this. There was a book called Confessions of a Madison Avenue Advertising Executive. Bear in mind, all of this was happening 40 years ago, and I know how much times have changed. It's an extremely good book. And he had this man, David Ogilvy, he wrote this wonderful little book with all these instructions in the end, which just sort of tell you what the rules are. And one of the things he talked about, he had little aphorisms, and one of them was, only in the most extreme of cases ever show your clients' faces, is what he said. Meaning the man who runs the company is going to want to have his picture on the ad. Be very, very careful about that. He wrote, because of course he was a writer and an advertising executive, so only in the most extreme cases ever show your clients' faces. So just because they own the company doesn't mean they can sell their product really well. And because these thoughts are in my mind. He also wrote there, the Greyhound Bus Company, these are like really from my childhood, but the Greyhound Bus Company had a motto which was, leave the driving to us. And he tells a story about how he was competing for the Greyhound Bus account. But before he made his presentation, he saw that presentation by whatever company it was, and he was so honest in his position. He said, I withdraw. He said, you will never find a better slogan than that. He said, you go with this company. They're the ones who should represent you. And you really love that kind of integrity in business, where something is more important than money. And that, of course, for decades that's what Greyhound Bus used. Now, to come all the way to the end of this, if I can even remember what it was. Oh, yes. he talked about the constant struggle that there will be between the art director and the copywriter. That the art director will be absolutely convinced that the art that they're doing is the most important thing. And I can't remember how the little aphorism went, but it was do not ever, the meaning was clear. Do not ever let the art director print your words across his picture. Just don't, because you can't read the words when you put them across the picture. And he would say, and the art director will always want you to put them across his picture because his picture is more important to him than your words. And he will want to sort of hide your words in his picture so you can't see it. And I've always had that in my mind. And for all the years since then, and I've been, in one way or another until recently, often involved in the promotional work of Ananda. And over again, the art director would print the words across their picture, and you wouldn't be able to read them anymore. And so there has to be someone who can take people's competing interests and actually see the bigger picture. Because the art director, who is visually oriented and communicates through visual images, will be certain that everybody in the world prefers pictures to words. And you have to have somebody who has an impartial view to be able to tell you which of these realities is the dominant. Now, if you think about it, that's simply a talent. It's not like that makes you a better person. When I was in that position, and I was always a word person, gopi is the word for the devotees of Krishna when he lived in Vrindavan, and they were the ones who took care of the cows. And so gopi was sort of a word for devotee, someone who loved God. But we always called ourselves the art gopis or the word gopis. And I was always a word gopi. And I do not have the capacity to create visual art. It's not, I've never been a painter or a drawer or a sketcher or anything like that. But I figured out after a while that I was a very good communicator. And I could see whether the art contributed to the communication or confused the communication. And even though I had a bias in favor of words, because I communicate more through words, but what I really discovered I had is that I had a sense of what communicated on a broader basis. And somebody has to do it. Just somebody has to be able to bring the elements together. And this is function. And without that function, for one thing, people may not get along. But if you're not respected, not for your position, it's my right to make this decision, but because people see that things work effectively if they cooperate with your judgment. There was a person who worked for me at Ananda during the time that I was involved with promotions and a lot of these things. And that person had a lot of talent and a lot of real ability, but had an unfortunate manner in the way they tried to assert it. And as a result, rather than people seeking them out for their expertise, people tried to do everything they could manage to avoid having to relate to the person because they were just no fun. They just had a way of doing things that just did not inspire. And my position was to try to sort of run interference. And that person wanted me to make a rule, make a rule that everyone had to relate to them. And I know my brothers and sisters at Ananda who are independent-minded in the extreme and also exceedingly fearless in their point of view. I said, it doesn't matter. I can make every rule in the world. And I promise you, if you are not helpful to these people, they will find a way to go around it. And I won't be able to stop them, and I'm not sure that I would. You have to make yourself useful to them. You have to show that you can save them from mistakes, that you can take what they've done that's good and you can make it better, that you really appreciate what they're doing and then help them to understand that other people are working just as sincerely from another angle. All of those things, those are function. She wanted to have position, I told her she had to create function. And it was annoying because she was good at what she did, but still it was a hard fight. Responsibility and function. That's what leadership really is. Responsibility to say, you know, I will stay here till the job is done. And that's what makes real leadership. When people would talk to me over the course of many years living in an ashram, they would want to have this, you know, more responsibility, more opportunity. I said, just wherever you are, make yourself invaluable. If you make yourself invaluable, if you show yourself to be someone who will always take responsibility and will always get the job done, then everybody will want you to work for them. And whatever little functions you carry out will be so incidental to the fact that you're just so great to have around because you'll make it happen. When I think my hobby is actually the right word for it. For a number of years, we have a school, a K through high school now, and the K through 8 school has been in existence a little bit longer. And part of what we've done in that school is we put on a huge theater production every year. And I took the part of doing the costumes. I like fabric, I like costume, I like children, but none of it is a full-time profession for me. So for some years, I've been able to take 6 weeks, but it's close enough to my responsibilities that I can justify the time because I've been closely involved in the founding of that school. I take 6 weeks and I do the costumes for the play. And one year we did a play that was set in India, and it was the first time we'd done an India-based play. We always do a play that's based on a very inspiring character, often an avatar or a saint, but of all traditions, the life of Buddha, the life of Krishna, Mirabai, who was a devotee of Krishna. We did Martin Luther King, we did the Dalai Lama, St. Francis, just lots of them over the course of many years. So we were doing, this was one that was set in India, and I had this idea that I would put the children, the little girls in actual saris, and I would put the little boys in actual dhotis. Dhoti is a skirt-like garment and other wiser heads tried to tell me this was a dumb idea, but I didn't realize that until the dress rehearsal, when the costumes fell off the children. That's the only time that's ever happened. I thought a sari was held on by the string into which you tuck the fabric. It's actually held on by the hips of the woman. So when you put little children who are just pre-puberty and they're built like pencils, no matter how tight you tie the string, the thing just falls right down. And the boys just got all tangled up in this dhoti. One little boy actually had to crawl on the ground over to me because he couldn't stand up because he'd gotten so wrapped up in his costume. Anyway, but we had another dress rehearsal, we had a performance. And I mean, the only reason I'm saying this, I'm just talking about what you do, if it's your job. It's like I had to re-sew, you know, a lot of costumes. I had to change a lot of things between one dress rehearsal and the next. And I went into our big temple where we put the performance on. I put every project on a separate chair in the auditorium, and I sewed and worked literally all night. I worked all the way up to the next dress rehearsal, got all of it done, got through the dress rehearsal, you know, and it was great. Actually, that night was I enjoyed that night as much as I've enjoyed any night in my life. Krishna's spirit was wonderful in the temple. We had the beautiful setup with all these pretty pictures, and I was just alone in our sanctuary. It was blissful. It was also, there was no choice. There was just absolutely no choice. These children had to have their costumes, and that was that. And the children could not perform without a good dress rehearsal so that they would know what they were supposed to do and wear and all of that. But that's what you do when you're the leader. Oh, it needs to be done. It's function. It's like whatever it is, this is what needs to be done. Now, Swami's been talking about it earlier. You are aware of your own feelings, but you put them aside. You think about the feelings of the people you're working with because everybody's feelings are going to really run the show, and you have to be aware of it. You you make the hard decision, you take the blame. These are all things that Swami has said. You take the blame. You don't have to be seen as the shining smart guy. If it will help to have a little humility, you take responsibility. Your function is to make it work for everyone else. And the more you do that, you see, the thing about it, what really happens is that it's really fun. A friend of mine who was a very gifted ballet dancer, he was a principal dancer with the San Francisco Ballet, he and his wife, for a number of years. And of course, a ballet dancer's career ends relatively early. They don't go to college, and some of them don't even finish high school, because your dancing career is, 15 to 30, or for most, although people are getting to be able to extend it. So you want to get as much of it as you can. So he loved dancing. He was magnificent. And then he reached retirement age, and he and his wife set up an academy and started teaching. It was very interesting. He said to me, he said, I thought the apex of joy was performing. He said, I've learned it's actually helping others to perform. He said the satisfaction he got from helping others to dance well, he said, was far more than he ever got from dancing well himself. I was very touched by that. And that's what happens. The best kind of leader is just looking at what is going on and feeling so much happiness to see success after success, and to see other people shine, and to realize that you're enabling all of these people, to have success. And in not an egoic way. One doesn't feel it egoically, but just like I had to sew those costumes so the kids could have them. And then they had no idea what I had done. It didn't matter to them. They were little kids. But there they were, and they're just their pleasure in it. I'm going to give one more child example, but it does relate to adults. There was, when we did the play of Saint Joan of Arc, there was this man who played the part of the King of France. He was about 10 or 11 at that time. And I had I have all this stuff in this costume closet. It's just over years. I had all these wonderful garish plastic rings. So he had a whole handful of rings. It was just, he just loved it. It was marvelous. And there was a certain point where, the theater's so much fun because here's the stage, and then 2 feet off is off stage. And off stage is an entirely different planet from on stage. So he was just sort of sitting on this stair, just slightly off stage. And as it happened, I could see him from the opposite wing. I could just look across and watch him. And he was just sort of on the floor, and he was taking off all his rings, and he was piling them up. And then he was gathering them back up again and putting them on different fingers and looking at them. And I mean, it was just perfect. I was just watching him enjoy himself, because I had taken the trouble to find the bag and put the rings and all of that. I got to be part of it. I mean, imagine how much more it is when you have a department of 50 or a company of 1,000. And we've all done it together. That's what Swamiji is talking about. And when he says, because self-importance is the natural human inclination. And that is also, we have to realize that. What he's done in this book, and he wrote it, as I mentioned, as J. Donald Walters, not even as Swami Kriyananda, is he has made certain statements that are sufficiently self-evident that they don't require paragraphs of explanation. But the vibrational authority that gives the book clarity and strength is because there are volumes behind that word. Self-importance is the natural inclination, because we are part of a greater reality. We are divine in our origins. We are expressions of the infinite spirit, but we have this confusion where we think that we are individual, separate egos. And we have this really deep confusion where we imagine that the more everybody recognizes and praises us as separate egoic individuals, the more power, the more money, the more stature we have, the happier we'll be. And these are very, very deep cosmic challenges that are planted within us. This is, in fact, the whole path of self-realization. Where does happiness really come from? What really causes us sorrow? And the natural inclination, is that the word you use? Because self-importance is the natural human inclination, it's not the divine inclination, but it is the natural human inclination. We have to be very, very watchful for that. Swamiji talked once about, he was very humble, I mean, to say the least. As he said himself, he said, speaking of reincarnation, he said he's just been a leader for so many incarnations that there's nothing about it, that there's no mystery and there's no romance to it for him. It just is what he does. He knows how to pull everybody's energy together and work through them. And he also is of such a state of spiritual understanding that the ego doesn't intrude itself. It doesn't try to take credit for what Swamiji really knows is just the divine energy. But the Ananda community that he started in Nevada County has grown to be quite a significant place. But even this happened when it was still very, very primitive. He was walking through the area where he lives, and when he bought it, it was literally just bare land. There wasn't a smidgen of anything on it. And he was walking through it, and there were mostly, I don't know if there were any cabins, but there were teepees and trailers, and he could hear people chanting, and there was a little meditation temple, and people were in there meditating. He was just walking through this where there had been nothing. And now there was this small hive of activity, of people living a beneficial spiritual life. And Swami said the thought crossed his mind. There was nothing here, and now there's this little community. He said, and the thought came, I did this. And he said, as soon as that thought came, he said his joy in what was going on around him was suddenly diminished. Because now, instead of enjoying the flow of energy all around him, he was taking all that energy and bringing it to himself. And he said, it felt terrible. That was his word. He said it just felt terrible. So with a strong effort of willpower, he just repudiated that thought. God has created this. You know, this has been the Guru's work. This has been the dedicated effort of all these people. And then he said his heart was free again. But for all of us, that natural inclination comes. I did this. I'm important because I did. They should look to me. They should be grateful. How dare they question my decisions? After all, I'm in charge. You know, it's what we do and how we do it that matters. And as Swami says, it's just one more contribution. Somebody has to be the sounding board. Somebody has to be the arbiter. Somebody has to hold the overall vision and see how each of the pieces come in. And if we do it really well, as Swami says, some of our subordinates who can really actually say, I designed this, I made this, I built this, I put it together with my own hands. And all the leader did was support him to do it. But that contribution is invisible compared to the one that actually made it. But let us celebrate our own unimportance, because that's where real freedom comes from, and that's where real success comes from. So God bless you, my friends.